So what we're going to do now is talk to you a little bit about the 50 years of truck mounts at HydraMaster. And to do that, John kind of introduced our next speaker. First, we're going to have him on video, and then he's going to join us live to answer a couple of questions. And that's Chris Ryan. Chris is our product manager here at HydraMaster, and he's been with the company for 25 plus years. He's worked in the engineering department. He's worked in the service department, as John mentioned. And today he has to work with me, the poor guy, as product manager. So he's probably the person that's the most in touch with all the different products that HydraMaster carries. And we are glad to have him part of our team. And what we're going to do now is share that video with you.
Hi, welcome to HydraMaster. I'm Chris Ryan, product manager here. And this year is our 50th anniversary. And it's really a great time to kind of go through the history of truck mounts here at HydraMaster over the last 50 years. So let's jump into a little bit of history here. So starting off in the very beginning in 1971, Mike Palmer created the Baron, his first truck mount. And this was a big truck mount, had filled up quite a bit of the van, had a 55-gallon drum, but you know, it had all the essentials of a truck mount. It had blower, pump, engine, propane tank, and it was really kind of the template, the blueprint of truck mounts to come. So that was very successful for a while, and really it evolved into in the mid 70s the Hydra Twin, the Hydra Station, and some other variants, and really it became a refined design, and it became something that, you know, the 55-gallon drum was gone, and it was more of a refined recovery tank, and the footprint shrunk, giving you more space in the van. But it really took hold, the branding and what HydraMaster, kind of the look and the feel of what a HydraMaster truck mount was. So around the same time, the direct drive that was used was actually a PTO unit. And the PTO unit was the Mark series Hydra van, and that was a Mark III, Mark IV, and Mark V. And these were designations of the blower size. And so it was still propane technology, but it was something that kind of freed up the space in the van, and really it wasn't, you know, it still took a little bit of knowledge of how to operate it, but it was still using the engine of the van. It was a great machine that was kind of the beginnings of direct drive units. So moving on to 1978, so the late 70s is really when we began, or when HydraMaster began the HydraCat series, and this is came from the HydraCat, I'm sorry, the Baron, and if you know words like decarbon, points and condenser, and boring out, oversizing the pistons on an engine, these were just bulletproof machines. They were in an era where everything was overbuilt, cast iron blocks, and all the components by a large portion of the manufacturers back in the late 70s were just overbuilt. And so it was just a great platform for, you know, continued use, and they just needed a little TLC back then. But this was when the HydraCat name was really born, and it really became a staple of HydraMaster, and really what the identity of the machines you see today. So around 1982, the Bobcat 2 and the 3.5 These were really the industry first entry-level machines, and they had they were very versatile. You could put them in trailers. They didn't take up a lot of space in the van. They were smaller units, but the whole idea was just economical, and it had a propane heater, so you got plenty of heat out of them. And for a single one use entry level starting your business, it was a great machine for that. And that was really it evolving it from a 3.0 blower to a 3.5 just gave a immense capability for its time. So enter 1984. So the mid 80s is really the beginnings of the HydraVan, the CDS that you know today. So the CDS, this was kind of the next evolution from the Mark series. So this was a direct drive, and it had some innovations. This was the first unit to use a flexible drive shaft rather than a solid shaft. And the space savings, because the tank was pushed all the way behind the seats, which you see today, you were able to use 75% of the cargo space in the van. But the amount, the simplicity, if you had a multi-van operation, the training was easy. It was just it was a revolutionary unit that still today holds a lot of the characteristics that it began with back in the mid 80s. So about kind of the late 80s, the HydraCat is it's kind of the next evolution of the late 70s HydraCat. And this was a 4.0 and 4.5, and really what this brought was bigger blower, bigger heater, more power. So running dual one, a multi-tech operation began to emerge, and it was crucial to have that. So you got that out of the CDS, and now you're getting that out of the HydraCat. And then moving into the early 90s, the AquaCat 3.5. And this is the first unit that was purpose-built with heat exchangers. And the early 90s was really the beginnings of the propane era kind of coming to an end, and heat exchangers were becoming more popular. They were becoming something of a, where it was, you had to pay for your heat, where the heat exchanger heat was free. And the 3.5 AquaCat was really the beginnings of that. So about 1993, the Crossfire and the Profire series was launched. And this was the last, 1993 was the last year where you had the Profire and the Crossfire, and that was the propane and heat exchange units. So they were equally, we built them and shipped them equally, but it was technology that we began to develop. And the Crossfires brought things, the tradition of the HydraCats, but also increased serviceability, increased power, and really kind of holding that space savings, the identity of the HydraCat to the 90s. So about the same time, the Spitfire was launched, and the Spitfire is the beginnings of what you'll see today. So you can see the frame changed. You had the rounded frame, the round tubes with the rounded corners. And this was an open air design, and the 3.2 and the 4.0, it had some derivatives like the 302, the 402, and these were indoor units, propane units that could run indoors for short periods of time. But the 3.2 is one of the first units that was really, it was somewhat equal to the Bobcat in that sense, where you had the ability to put it in the back of a truck, you had the ability to put it in a trailer, and if you just needed kind of that backup unit, but also it could kind of stand on its own. It It was just continuing that because there is the need for that entry level that unit. So 1997 was a big year for the CDS, and we call it the overdrive. So this is when we slowed down the speed of the CDS and in turn increase the speed of the blower. Whereas the previous model went directly to the blower. So the speed of the engine was the speed of the blower. This, we had a speed increase, and this allowed us to get 3,000 RPM out of the blower, and the heat exchangers were more efficient. And really the improvements were extensive at this point. So again, we took a lot of the things that worked well, and we took a lot of the things that needed improvement, that we wanted to improve. Those are the things that we attacked that year. So the CDS, we introduced the Salsa, which that was the beginnings of getting the direct drives to the temperature of what the Truckmounts were capable of. But again, the CDS, we just continued to improve it and just make it, continue to make it better over the years. So about the same year, the Max series was introduced, and the Max series was the beginning of a lot of technology that previously wasn't available. Things such as temperature control, more precise temperature control, catalytics to increase the engine exhaust temperature, stainless steel multi-pass heat exchangers, and the beginning of the diverter exhaust. So the diverter exhaust was, you were able to, as the machine heated and cooled and you weren't using, you put the wand down, the diverter would open up and it would bypass the heat exchanger, so it would cool down the temperature. So you no longer dump water in the heat exchanger or into the recovery tank. And so there was savings of volume for extended cleaning times, and just a lot of great technology that really economically and really just wasn't there prior to this time. So in 2002, the Boxer 421 was born, and this was the machine, probably the best-selling truck mount of its time. And it had utilized technology from the Max, the diverter control, the temperature control, the RTD temperature control, and the blower heat exchanger. And it was just really efficient, an open air design, just a great package of, it was a small footprint, but man, was the power of this machine. And a lot of serviceability features, such as the electrical center. We put in a wiring diagram and a built-in test light, so if you needed to troubleshoot right there, you had that available. So just some small things we put in there, just to make it, just to give more features on already feature-rich machine. So by 2006, we introduced the Boxer 318, and the Boxer 318 took things from the 421 and was really to bring the 3.2 and that type of machine to the mid 2000s. And we were able to really reduce the heat exchanger count, keep the footprint small, and take a lot of the efficiencies that were on the 421 and really make things better from a standpoint of serviceability, accessibility, whether that be for maintenance or for service. So about 2008, we came out with the first Titan series, and this is the 875. The 875 was the biggest slide-in produced at HydraMaster, and it had a 5.9 blower, a 1.6 liter GM engine. It was a true 3-wand machine, and this thing you could put 300 feet on all 3 ports, and you could run this thing. It would get drying times equal to one single line at 300 feet. Temperature wise, you could run 3 RXs continuous and you maintain easily 190 degrees. It was just an incredible machine. And sadly, with EPA restrictions and CARB restrictions, we were unable to. We had to discontinue it just due to those reasons. So that really leads us to our current lineup today, kind of as we have it. So a lot of the things I talked about are incorporated in our equipment today. The CDS really has grown and expanded to the CDS X Drive. So the X Drive is the first direct drive to utilize the transit package. It's electric driven, and you still get the space savings and the additional cab height. You get better storage capability. The CDS, same thing, is we're continually improving that, making the things that work well, keeping those, and just the things that we need to just make a little better. We just constantly keep that current. The new Titan Tough series, the 325, again, that economical machine, but high performance. So the aesthetics on the Titan series with the lighted dash and kind of the improved, having information right there on the dash, and really boosting the capabilities of it has been just a great improvement on these machines. The truck mount to go 4000. This is an awesome machine that we're able to put into any vehicle, whether it be a trailer, a truck, or anything of that, and instantly you have an extra machine if you need it. So this has really been a look into the last 50 years of HydraMaster, and I'm so glad you came along and joined me. It's just been a wonderful 50 years, and we're looking forward to another 50 more.
Good morning, Chris. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Good morning, Doyle.
You look great. Thank you. You're down. Oh, you're in another part of Smart Share Central down the stairs, aren't you?
Yep.
Yeah, that's where Louie and Dennis will be doing their thing next week, or actually on Thursday. But we got a lot going on down there right now. So thank you for that rundown history lane. I think a lot of old-time HydraMaster customers probably saw a lot of equipment that they recognized in that. Had a couple of questions for you. I've asked both Mike and Chris and John this. But I wanted your opinion too. What do you see as the most significant development in the 50-year history of HydraMaster truck mounts?
Well, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I do echo Mike and John on heat exchangers. And I think all their points are absolutely spot on. Just the safety aspect, I certainly have my share of near misses with that when I be in the back of a van and trying to figure out why the pilot isn't coming on, and then the whole heater just launches on all at once and you get a nice big fireball out the heater. So that definitely is very important. But as far as once heat exchangers got, kind of as John was saying, once they the reliability improved on them, just the free heat, not having to maintain a heater system, I would say that's the biggest. But there's just a lot of each technology is stacked on the other. Heat exchangers have gone through their kind of their improvements over the last 10-15 years for sure, to make them what they are today, as far as temperature control systems, as far as diverter valves and things like that.
I wanted to ask you a bit, you mentioned on the CDS, we've been making the CDS for 35 years. You talked about the Mark III, the Mark IV, the Mark V, which were power take-up, and then the CDS is demonstrated. But we've worked hard to continuously improve that unit over the years, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely. you know, and it, it's kind of like what I was saying in the video. We try and keep what works there, and you know, we've updated features like you know, from, you know, way back when, you know, back in the 80s, it had a Venturi chemical system. So the whole chemical was, it went through the whole heat exchangers, hoses, fittings. So you got, you know, chemical buildup, things like that. So when we went to last step chemical, you know, that improved the reliability, and so a lot of things like that that were just initial technology is, you know, as far as throttle controls, and the overdrive was a big one, you know, getting that. So it was making the engine more reliable because we're reducing the speed of the engine while we're maintaining a higher blower speed. So I think we the CDS for us is, it's our baby since '84, and we've always tried to, you know, it's just an amazingly popular machine that we always try and keep significant, you know, and make it always something that is of value to the customer.
Well, before I asked you our last serious question about carb emission standards and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted you to get a chance to see if you wanted to, you know, refute anything that your father-in-law said.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Did you grew up in the business like me? So tell our
Yeah.
audience a little bit about that.
Actually, so I started working for John I was trying to figure this out the other night. I think it was 91. It may have been late 90. And I am his son-in-law. And the premise is, or at least, you know, and it was probably a good move. Me having two kids now, and he, you know, I was freshly graduated from high school, and my wife had one more year. So he largely disguised the hiring to keep an eye on me. So that was the beginning of, I was working at a gas station, and my first day, I remember driving in, I wasn't really sure what the company actually did. I didn't know if it was a pool supply company or what. So I quickly found out what it was, and started out in shipping, and moved over to the shop, and you know, kind of like a lot of distributors today, there was just a lot of interaction with HydraSpec and HydraMaster. So I got to know everybody at HydraMaster really well. And just through that, the Bud Pratt, the service manager at the time, he, you know, talking with him so much, I just kind of out of the blue asked him, and I was thinking a couple of years from now, do you guys ever hire people? And actually, one of the other techs I worked with, Martin Van Dyke, he had said, no, not really. And kind of, I figured, okay, well, you know, that's that. And Martin called me 2 days later, and he said, so, you know, you were talking about that. How soon can you be up? And so it was like 2 weeks later, I had come up, and I was staying at a hotel down the road, and I started, you know, in the shop. And that was about 90, I want to say 93. And I slowly just worked my way up through tech support, up to service manager, and then and just a quick story about Steve Brandt. I remember we were talking, it was kind of cool. HydraMaster's always been like, kind of like Mike was saying, very family oriented, and you could go in and have a conversation with Steve. It wasn't like you couldn't go talk to the president. And I remember one day I just went in to talk to him how things were going in the shop, and he said, you know, one day I think I'd like to have you in engineering. And I kind of was like, yeah, sure, right. And then, you know, 3 years later, he had actually set it up so I could move over there and begin as a kind of a liaison between tech support and engineering. So, and then from that point, it just, you know, I worked my way through engineering as a project manager, and now, you know, onto product manager.
Well, you know, I appreciate those comments, and it's great to see so many of our friends and customers in the chat room being reminded of equipment from the past, and appreciate their loyalty to HydraMaster and so many of the positive comments they're making. But there was one
Yeah,
thing
that's
you
great.
mentioned in your presentation that I think a lot of people might be interested in, that you understand and can explain a little bit. Carb emission standards on small engines have really changed the trajectory of truck mount
Oh,
and
absolutely.
number of engine choices. Could you share with our audience a little bit about that, since it is quite a technical subject, but I think you explain it well?
Yeah, it's, it's interesting because, carbon EPA largely, there is no, that I would say back in the 90s, it was more about cars, and on-road vehicles, off-road vehicles, or off-road equipment, which is kind of the category we've always flown under. It really didn't affect us. And actually, I have a chart here that I often refer to, and it's kind of, you probably can't read it, but that's kind of a schedule that we get every once in a while from engine manufacturers, and it has to do with, everything that happens through the EPA and CARB. They kind of give engine manufacturers years and years to kind of maneuver to begin to meet those standards. And so when I first started designing equipment, you could really get an engine, you could put whatever muffler you want on it, whatever heat exchanger, and you could just kind of run with it, whether it be Briggs, Kubota, Kohler, really any manufacturer. And then about 2000 and I want to say 2007, there was a dramatic shift where catalytics were required on some engines. Anything over 1 liter required, definitely required catalytics. And really at that time, it became very apparent that we were going to get close to car emission standards. So what I mean by that is, so I'll just take one of their numbers is, as far as I believe it's percent, but of like hydrocarbons and NOx, like you had to be within, we'll just say 8. And they had predicted, I believe it was 4 years from that point, to say you had to be 10 times below that standard for these engines. And that's what really drove out, because I was talking about the 875, and that's what kind of forced us to discontinue the 875, was what happened with CARB and EPA is, it's very difficult for these machines or the engines to reach these standards without a catalytic fuel injection. And that's a lot of cost. And not only that, it costs a lot for these engine manufacturers to certify these engines. Each engine that you see that has an EPA certification, it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars for them to get that certification. So it makes it more challenging. You can't just grab an engine and heat exchanger. You have to be very, and put it together. You have to be very careful with that, as far as balancing what you're doing in the engine, and so you can't just put the quietest muffler on there, the most efficient heat exchanger, and any muffler. You have to put what will match the manufacturer's certification. So it's tricky now, but I think it makes a better product, and it's definitely the way we need to be going for environmental concerns. So,
Well, thank you for that information, Chris. We appreciate you joining us today.
yeah, you're welcome.